Good afternoon. I'm Joana Barbany, and I'm General Director for Digital Society at the Government of Catalonia. And this is the second session of a series of 4 where we will talk about digital rights from Catalonia. 2 weeks ago, we had the first session based on digital rights and artificial intelligence, and we had the opportunity to shed some light into the European Commission's proposal for a regulation on artificial intelligence. We were with Mr. Werner Sten. He's a cabinet expert at the Office of the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Margaret Vestager. And it's also a very rich, we had a very rich exchange of views between Mr. Sten and also with Mrs. Carme Peiró. She's a local journalist expert on AI and its ethics, and in open data and digital transformation. You will find the video of the first session posted in the website, and you will see also the video that we are now recording. So it is not just, after the debate, there will be also some kind of information that we will share with someone. So in this digital rights live session, we will talk about different items that now we will see. But yeah, we are doing this kind of debates because, as you know, at the end of 2019, the Parliament of Catalonia expressed its support to a charter for digital rights and responsibilities from Catalonia. And this charter is a project coordinated by the government of Catalonia, but also it's made by a lot of people. Okay, it aims to promote a legislative and democratic framework to guarantee human rights in digital age. And as I said, it's a social and open innovation project, and it's in constant construction. We are building this charter every day. So we want to have the ideas that we get today. These ideas will be also in this charter for digital rights. So I invite you all to contribute to this charter. You will see, I think that I now will post in the chat the internet address for getting into the charter. But by the moment we are we are talking about the different rights as universal access to the internet, to have an open, inclusive internet governance model. We talk also of freedom of expression and information on the net, digital innovation and creation and access and distribution of knowledge. We talk also about data protection, and also there was a chapter talking about training and digital inclusion warranty. So we have our local perspective through the development of this charter, but we want to contribute in a global debate. So we are, today we have here 2 experts, and we want just to talk about them, about the specific areas of digital rights, okay? Let me introduce, in the first time, Mrs. Rebecca McKinnon. Just a quick reminder, after the discussion, we will be open to in the Q&A, okay, for the audience. If someone wants to have any question or to have any comment, just feel free to write them in the chat. You can write in Catalan, Spanish, whatever you want, okay? So as you can see, we have here Rebecca McKinnon, and then also Vicent Partal and Albert Royo. Let me introduce first of all Mrs. Rebecca McKinnon. She's a Vice President in Global Advocacy at the Wikimedia Foundation. It's an entity who's working to promote and defend the legal and regulatory landscape essential to the future of the free knowledge globally. Okay. She previously was founding director of Ranking Digital Rights, a research program at New America that sets global standards for corporate respect for freedom of expression and privacy online. And she's author of Consent of the Networked, the worldwide struggle for internet freedom. She's co-founder of the citizen media network Global Voices, and she serves on the board of directors of the Committee to Protect Journalists, and is also a founding member of the Global Network Initiative. Between 1998 and 2004, she was CNN's bureau chief in Beijing and Tokyo. She has taught also at the University of Hong Kong and the University of Pennsylvania, and had fellowships at Harvard, Princeton, and the Open Society Foundations. So she holds also an EB Magna Cum Laude in government from Harvard, and was a Fulbright scholar in Taiwan. So it's amazing to have you here today. So Rebecca, the floor is yours. It's your time. You have just 15 minutes or 10 minutes just for make your presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Excuse me. Thanks so much for inviting me to speak with you today. And I want to say that I'm very excited to read the Charter for Digital Rights and Responsibilities, and really congratulate everyone who has participated in that. It really addresses key issues of how our society will evolve in the digital age. And you mentioned that 10 years ago, I published a book called Consent of the Networked. And in that book, I really talked about how we needed to shed our, I think, naivete that people had at the time, that there was a lot of assumptions that the internet, just by existing, just by having social media, society would become more free and democratic, and people would be able to exercise their rights and circumvent authoritarianism. And of course, things have not turned out that way. And in the book, I called on everyone in society, whether it's legislators, whether it's policymakers, whether it's people who work in technology companies and industry, and citizens, that if we want the internet to develop in a manner that actually supports human rights and is compatible with democracy, we all have to take responsibility for ensuring that it's owned, operated, and governed in a manner that supports the rights that we are entitled to, and also enables us to build the kind of society that we want for our children and for future generations. So I congratulate you for this effort, and also while I haven't spent a lot of time in Catalonia, I've just been to Barcelona once, I've admired from afar a lot of developments in the open knowledge community in Catalonia, the consortium of academic libraries, the community-led Wi-Fi initiatives, open data initiatives, and so I congratulate the community that you work with in Catalonia for this work and for being so proactive. So today I'm going to talk a bit about open knowledge, free knowledge, and its role. I want to start with a couple of pictures that one of your colleagues is going to be so kind as to help me share, so that I don't make too many technical errors here. Yes, this is the first picture. This is Dr. Ala Najjar. He was the 2021 Wikipedian of the Year. And I think all of you are familiar with Wikipedia, which is an open encyclopedia written by volunteer contributors, people from around the globe who share their knowledge and time. There are 59 million articles in 300 languages. People have made over 3 billion edits now over nearly 20 years. And Dr. Ala Najjar is one of these many volunteers who has focused specifically in the past 18 months on COVID-19 related medical information. He's a medical doctor who has been spending his breaks during emergency room shifts addressing COVID-19 misinformation on the Arabic version of Wikipedia. And he is one of the many volunteers who works very hard to ensure that Wikipedia in its various languages have quality, reliable information about life and death, medical matters. I want to show one other photograph, if our colleague can show the next one, which is of Dr. Netha Hussain. She is a clinical neuroscientist and a doctor who has been spending much of her free time, when not working hard as a doctor, editing COVID-19 related articles in English and in her native language in southwestern India. And she has also been focusing her efforts on improving Wikipedia articles specifically about COVID-19 vaccines. And these two individuals, which I thought it was important to see the human beings behind our open knowledge projects. These two people are among more than 3,000 volunteers that have helped Wikipedia to emerge as one of the most trusted sources for up-to-date information about COVID-19. Spanning nearly 7,000 articles in 188 languages. And they are able to support knowledge about that help not only students, but also help individuals understand the facts about COVID-19 and to obtain this information without being profiled, without having your information collected and sold to advertisers, that people are able to access the information without being tracked. And all of this is possible because of a policy environment that makes it possible. And so I wanted to talk a bit about this and also about the way in which content moderation works on Wikipedia that enables an open knowledge project to thrive. And what's very important, I think, that sometimes in the open discourse about free knowledge projects is, of course, the right to knowledge is a right to knowledge, right? And so if people want to create an open knowledge project that shares knowledge, the community that creates this project has to, of course, have a process for determining what is knowledge and what is not knowledge, what are facts and what are not facts, what are appropriate citations and what are not, what is credible, what is not. To have a system for that, and a system for, of course, removing information that does not meet those standards. And that system on Wikipedia is developed by the volunteers in a bottom-up way, and editors receive authority, are conferred authority by the community to watch the pages and ensure their quality. And this system is not dictated by the Wikimedia Foundation at all. It's really developed by the volunteers who understand the context within their own languages, who understand what the sources are in different languages, and are also working to make sure that things are translated and understood in the appropriate context. And the point here is that we need to make sure that as regulators are working to address some serious problems with our current online environment, related to the spread of disinformation, related to the spread of extremist content, that the regulations that are put in place do not make it more difficult for communities to build and govern. And this is very important, to govern, not only to build and develop and operate, but to govern open knowledge projects, to develop their own rules and their processes for enforcing them. Which brings me briefly to the Digital Services Act, which is currently under discussion in the European Union. And we're still waiting to see exactly how that's going to play out. and members of our foundation. And our job is, of course, not to tell Wikipedians how to edit Wikipedia, but our job is to defend the policies and laws and to advocate for policies and laws that enable our open knowledge community to do their work and to thrive and to build their governance structures for these open knowledge projects. We've been releasing a number of articles and speaking to the media recently, trying to make the case that while there are some serious issues with major digital commercial platforms, particularly in relation to the targeted advertising business model that, of course, collects large amounts of user information and then amplifies content that is going to maximize engagement and is going to maximize the chances that certain individuals will react to it. All that has nothing to do with knowledge in particular. It just has to do with content and engagement. When regulators are working to address the source of the problems that cause the spread of illegal and harmful content online, that the regulations should not be so prescriptive that communities that are building open knowledge projects like Wikipedia, but also other public interest technology projects, have the ability to build self-governance structures that are relevant to the subject matter and the purpose of their public interest platform, and are not going to result in so much liability on volunteer contributors and nonprofit projects that the open knowledge projects would not be able to proceed, would not be able to operate. So that is a concern we have, and that we've been voicing to members of the European Parliament through our affiliates and speaking to our stakeholders and supporters about this. But we want to make sure that as open knowledge communities are all working to do a better job of addressing all sorts of challenges in the online environment, that communities are able to govern their projects in a manner that is actually suitable to their culture, that enable experts to identify problematic information that cannot be categorized as knowledge, because automated top-down systems that some of the proposed provisions for the DSA would require would make it impossible for communities to actually operate in a distributed way. So that's that was just in my opening remarks what I wanted to convey, and also just finally in the Charter for Digital Rights and Responsibilities of Catalonia, I just wanted to emphasize the importance of one sentence in there that I think underscores this point, that not only does it say that everyone should be able to create, distribute, and access knowledge on the internet, but it also says everyone should be able to verify information, right? So the right to an open knowledge project is that communities should be able to develop their own processes to govern and verify information, and also the law should support their ability to develop those processes. So with that, I'll stop and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you for your speech, Mrs. McKinnon. Then we will talk about that, okay, with Albert. Now is the turn for our second speaker, Mr. Vicent Partal. He's the director of Vilaweb, The newspaper he founded in 1995 and is it was the first digital only in Europe. So it was 25 years ago. Yeah. He has worked before at El Temps, El Punt, Diari de Barcelona, Catalunya Ràdio, La Vanguardia, and also in the Spanish television. So he has worked in both newspapers and televisions and radio, of course. And he's considered one of the pioneers of the internet in the Catalan countries. He's as a reporter and correspondent, Mr. Partar has covered events around the world. And he has won also the City of Barcelona Award for Journalism and the National Internet Award. And in 2004, he also won the National Journalism Award. So he's also a chairman of the board of directors at the European Journalism Center based in Maastricht. It's a continent-wide professional organization that works to promote quality journalism in Europe and to assimilate the great technological and cultural changes through media's digitalization. He's also an academic member of the Catalan Institute of Science and Humanities, it's LIEC. And well, Mr. Partar, it's your time. You have just also 10 minutes or whatever you need. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. I will talk from the point of view of a journalist. So let me start with something which is obvious. I am already in my 60s and I have lived under dictatorship, under the Franco regime, and in democracy also, in open democracies sometimes, in increasingly authoritarian democracies, such as the current Spanish one, which at least for Catalans looks like a neoliberal state. And the fundamental boundary between these worlds, between the dictatorship or authoritarian world and the democracy world, is the explosion of the internet. I have no doubt that we live in a better world simply because censorship is practically impossible. And in my opinion, the people like me and some of ours who lived in a censorship world, in a world where censorship was working, we immediately recognize how important the internet it is for everything. So there is no doubt about this thing, but also at the same time, there is no doubt that we are facing a lot of problems. And after I will talk about these problems, but in any case, I don't want to lose sight of this fact that we live, in my opinion, in a better world. The importance of the freedom of information and therefore the importance of the free flow of information as a fundamental right, in my opinion, is beyond any question. In the first session of the United Nations General Assembly, the resolution 59 was one of the first that they adopted, and I quote, "Freedom of information is a fundamental human right and the touchstone of all the freedoms to which the United Nations is consecrated." So there is no discussion in theory. We all agree that on the need for the free flow of information. But in practice, things are more complicated for various reasons, and I want to stress some of these reasons. First, in my opinion, is confusion. Precisely because today it's not, how to say that, presentable to oppose the free flow of information. One reaction is to complicate the process of information by adding noise, make it unfeasible. And for instance, the debate on the fake news, in my opinion, is a clear example of that. Before, nobody argued that a lie is a lie. And in this sense, what I'm afraid today is that the expression fake news, the very concept of fake news, the only thing that really achieves is to remove the lies from the level of content where they were and to turn the debate all lies honorable and legitimate. In the past, we cannot discuss about a lie. This is a lie. Stop. Today, we can discuss about a lie. It looks like it is honorable and legitimate to discuss about a lie because we say, well, it's a fake news. Let's discuss about this thing. That have a great impact on the flow of information. Also, especially on the public sphere, because in the face of the evident danger that some fake news, let's think about the vaccines or the coronavirus, etc., or political affairs in many countries in the world. So in the face of this danger, some governments and some political tendencies wield the flag again of censorship as the lesser evil. So we are in a so difficult situation that maybe we can censor some contents, we can come back to the old times where the state, where the government can control the flow of information. This is a serious danger today. And even we have seen very sophisticated methods of manipulation appear. For instance, the so-called verifiers, the fact-checking organizations. Most of the cases, they are fundamental, a very amazing job. They are playing a very important role in our societies. But we already know many cases where under the umbrella of we are a fact-checking organization, some government, some companies, some political movements, some countries are manipulating information for the interest of the groups or the ideology they share. So untangling the handle when that things happens is very complicated. That should be one of my first concern. The second is this explosion of informants and the role media play in this world. Again, I consider very positive this scenario where everybody can issue information. From a democracy point of view, this is perfect, but it comes with a price. In the past, we come from a world where, at least in theory, the professional organization, the media, press, certified that something was information and that something was not, was conversation, banal things, nothing that is interesting for the people in general. And this exploded. This is no longer real. I don't miss those times before. I'm clear on this, but I'm aware, and some of the things Rebecca was talking before is relevant in this point, that we have not yet found the balance between the right to express everything and when this thing is relevant or not for the society. Today, the media, in my opinion, cannot reclaim that role we had. We no longer have the right to this privilege. On the contrary, I think that we must humbly accept that the scenario is changing, that we're in a new scenario, and see how we, the media, can help the whole society to create a better flow of information. But unfortunately, I must say that this is not the attitude of most of my colleagues. Media is in a bubble. They still believe they are part of the power and that they have rights that the other people doesn't have. So it's very difficult to manage this situation from my point of view. This is in part because probably we are living today the best moment in history for journalism, for the flow, the circulation of information at any level, and the worst time in history for media companies. And it is very difficult to deal this situation that is provoking crisis at all levels on the media environment that sometimes are being very important even in the general society. The debate about the so-called news deserts in America, for instance, the fact that there is there are some cities in the United States and Canada where there are no longer local press, with all the implications that have for society, could be an example on that. Of course, these problems have serious implications. One is working conditions. Working conditions have clearly degraded on most media outlets, and these have an impact, have an effect on the final product. It's obvious, no one can do it. But also when the media cannot finance themselves and be self-sufficient, it's very difficult to prevent newspapers, TV stations, radios, internet newspapers from falling into the hands of economic or political powers that always are interested in control media. And of course, that have consequences, serious consequences on the information we provide to our readers, the information our readers get from us. But finally, my greatest concern is about complexity. In my opinion, it is clear that we live in an extraordinary, complex world. When I was a kid, I cannot imagine this thing we are living in. And the complexity of our world has evolved. I have sometimes not the feeling that I have been living in 2 different centuries, but that I have been living in 4 different centuries, something like this. And we cannot understand this world in an easy way. This is impossible. But the press, the media, was used to easily explain complex decisions to the population. That was our business. But today we need the opposite, and we don't know how to do it. We cannot explain a complex world with easy recipes. This is impossible. I'm sure that this is a concern that Rebecca will share also later on. To me, the big question is, how can we explain the great complexity of the world we live in if we do not ask our readers to make an effort themselves? How can we help them if they doesn't work by themselves to embrace complexity and therefore to embrace quality, rigor as necessary element of analysis? And because of things that are happening so fast, because it's 25 years, let's say that, we have not enough experience to understand what we are doing. But to me, this is the main problem: how to make people aware that complexity is good, is not bad, and that without understanding complexity, we cannot understand our world. Just to finish this moment, I must confess that I still find I don't know very well how to differentiate between information and knowledge. I understand all the theories, and I understand that where are the differences, but in my mind, it's very difficult to distinguish one to another. And probably it is because of that maybe unconsciously, I always put them so close one to each other. And this is because in the end, to me, the big problem of our societies, the big problem for democracy, is that we need a lot of high quality information in order to be able to take very important decisions on very complex issues, more complex than ever. And how to do it, to me, from the side of knowledge and information, is the big question. How the society is able to change our minds and to create an environment where complexity is perceived as a good thing, and where no longer people want something fast food information, this kind of things. This is a world we have to live in. We were born in this time. We are living this time. This is what it is. And in my opinion, the most fundamental thing is that the time where this kind of decisions were made by a few is long gone. This is impossible today, thanks to the internet and thanks to the social, cultural, political changes that came with the internet. And here is where the discussion must begin, in my opinion.
Yes, thank you, Vicent. So there's the concept of how kind of governance, that internet, it's not like the regular world, the natural world. We need to talk about, or to think about, how can we make this kind of governance on in the internet. And if you take a look into our charter, we talk about that decisions, we need to take decisions and solutions in another way of doing things. And we need to regulate or not. I don't know, maybe we don't need to regulate anything. I don't know. We should discuss about that. So now it's turn for, I will give the word to Mr. Albert, because he will be the one who will just manage the debate. Albert, Mr. Royo is a political scientist who has always been involved, as you know, in the fields of public affairs, government, communications, and international relations. And he's mainly focused on civic tech, public diplomacy, and EU affairs. And he's behind the organization of this series of live sessions on digital rights. And he's also a contributor to the charter. So he's aware of everything, and he knows everything about that. Just a question, we are recording this session. So there is 30 people missing. I think it's time, but they were just on the list, but we will record this session, as you know, and we will share what's happening here on our social network and with these people, just to have a debate after also. Okay, so Mr. Roy, it's your turn. You can just moderate the table if you want.
Thank you so much, Joanna. So Rebecca, please, would you like to take the floor and react to Vicent's and Joanna's remarks, please?
Yeah, well, thank you, and Vicent, I really appreciated so many things that you said, but I thought I'd pick up on the final exchange around governance, because I think it's really important. We hear so many policymakers or kind of thought leaders in the space talking about fixing the internet, right? That this bill will fix the internet, or it will make the internet safe, or it will eliminate crime on the internet, or so on. And this is where, I think, Joanna, you were talking about the internet being different than physical space, and that is true, but it is still a human space, right? And sort of the nature of online spaces are not so technical that you can just fix them like you fix the television. When nobody talks about fixing Barcelona, or fixing New York City or fixing London in some kind of absolute way. It would be considered ridiculous, right? Yet we talk about fixing the internet. And just as sort of an example, people talk about, somehow if we just have some kind of fix or solution, or if the tech platforms only deployed their technology in a more responsible way, various problems would be solved. It's kind of like saying there is a way to fix crime in New York City. And of course, no politician is going to be taken seriously. I mean, they're going to address crime, right? They're going to have proposals to address crime, to reduce crime, et cetera. They're not going to talk about fixing crime. Because the only way you would fix crime in New York City or London or Barcelona is to become Pyongyang, right? And there's a reason we don't want to be Pyongyang. And so, in offline spaces, in governance of offline spaces with communities, it's always a trade-off, right? So yes, you need rules, right? Otherwise you have a state of nature. Right, and a state of nature, you do not have rights, and life is nasty, British and short for all but the biggest and strongest and wealthiest. And so obviously we need rules, we need governance in order to protect rights, in order to enable rights online as well as offline. But to say you're going to have a fix and solve a problem is I would suggest kind of the wrong way to think about governing information or online communities as it is with offline spaces. And to continue the analogy around sort of problems with crime, it's always a constant give and take. Yes, you need police to enforce laws. You need, but it's never going to be. Nobody's going to be ever happy. You're not going to have all of society fully happy with the system that you have in place. And you need to make sure, of course, that the way in which you are governing your laws and enforcing your laws is actually serving the interests of communities, that the laws and the rules are both developed and implemented with input from the communities. Exactly, it's taking everyone's rights and interests into account. And then you put a system into place, and then there are always various stakeholders who feel that it has overcorrected in one direction or another, and you have constant political negotiation moving it back and forth. And it never ends, because that's the nature of human society. And so I think we have to accept that as we move forward, figuring out how to govern digital spaces and technologies, we're not going to fix the problems as long as humans are humans, as long as we remain human. But it's a matter of developing a system of governance through which abuses of power can be understood and identified and held accountable, in which you have the ability to, when harms are happening, that there can be a process for addressing them and adjusting both the rules and the governance system around addressing those problems, and of course redress when there's harm. And I think we've certainly found that approaches to physical jurisdiction within borders don't work so well in the internet space, when you have laws being passed in one country that affect the internet globally. And how do we ensure that everyone's rights are being respected and enabled? And it's very difficult, of course. But I also agree with so many things that Vicente was saying about the old gatekeepers have lost control, and we do need more public participation. We need more what some colleagues former colleagues of mine have talked about: public interest technology, digital civic goods and resources, and how do we, through public policy, support and encourage more participation, in addition to making sure that you have the legal structures that protect people's rights, again, to govern knowledge and information. And it's complex.
Indeed, thank you so much. I have to stress that, in fact, the Catalan Charter for Digital Rights and Responsibilities, it was a participatory process. So in this sense, we also try to involve as many people as possible. Now we have kind of a cascade of questions. I would ask you please to offer short answers. One question for Rebecca and one for Vicent. Rebecca, you have an admirable career track of defending open technology and digital rights. Wikimedia has also played a unique role in supporting free knowledge for the entire world. But as you know from your own experience, there are many countries where the leadership does not welcome free information. How does Wikimedia get around the barriers in these closed societies? And then, if I may, I will also read out the question for Vicent. What is your opinion about how the new generations manage the complexity that you have explained? Maybe for them, there is no complexity. Maybe just for us, the older people like me, Alejandro says. So maybe, Rebecca, you can answer to the first question, and then I pass the floor to Vicent.
Sure. Yeah. Well, since Wikipedia began, various governments have been trying to censor and block Wikipedia, and some pretty successfully. We've been blocked in China for some time, for example. There are other places that have blocked Wikipedia where we've succeeded in getting them unblocked, getting Wikipedia unblocked. Turkey being an example where Wikipedia had been blocked in Turkey. But in January 2020, Turkey's highest court ended up ruling that the block of Wikipedia was unconstitutional. And that was through working with our community and working with many stakeholders in Turkey who recognize the value to Turkish society of having these free knowledge projects available, and that blocking them and then blocking the Turkish people's participation and voice in these global platforms was counterproductive, and so the case was eventually made. Wikipedia also receives a lot of requests from various governments to remove content, and we have a transparency report online, which includes information about the number we receive, and you can see we comply with very few, and of course, in most cases, you know, it's the community enforcing its own community rules in any case. And we're also partnering with human rights organizations to increase access to knowledge, and to we're working with the UN Human Rights Office to encourage more people to contribute in different countries, but also petitioning governments, advocating towards governments around the world to that impeding access to knowledge is not the way forward. And it is, you know, and it's not just about Wikipedia, I have to say, just briefly before I hand it back. Wikipedia and its quality depends on free sources, open sources of journalism, open sources of scientific research. We depend on not just governments not censoring Wikipedia, but on governments not censoring journalists who are reporting facts that maybe certain governments don't like, and not censoring or threatening scientists and other academic researchers who are publishing diligent research based on years sometimes of fact finding, and study to bring information to the public. And again, if scholars and scientists cannot do their work freely, and if journalists, whether it's large media organizations or citizen journalists or small grassroots community news organizations, if all of these different types of people are not supported in their right to contribute original knowledge and facts, we're all suffering. It's a full ecosystem.
Vicente, about complexity.
Yes, I started by saying that I am on my 60s, so I'm very open on this reality. I understand that probably people being 20-something teenagers, even they can use these tools and use this and live in this environment much better than I am doing today. But we must be aware that the complexity of our world today is higher than ever. And even if they are able, and I'm sure they are, to manage this complexity with more speed than me, they will face the complexity the same way. For instance, the coronavirus crisis. 60 years ago, the coronavirus crisis could start in Wuhan and spend 2 months as a China-only phenomenon, and that will allow people to understand that something is happening there, etc., etc., etc. Today, it's the moment someone put the feet in a plane, the crisis is all over. So this is really different. We cannot diminish the importance of speed. And Paul Virilio, 20 years ago, the French philosopher, insists very much on this concept. Speed will be the biggest problem, and the problem, being a problem, doesn't mean nothing but this is a problem. We must learn how to deal with these kind of problems. And in this sense, sometimes I think that if we think like an historian on the long period of time, to me it's very clear that the powers, political power, economical powers, etc., media power, were surprised by the eruption of the internet. They doesn't expect this thing. Even for the first years of development of the internet, they didn't really understand what was happening. And now we are in sort of a contra-reform period where they are trying not to lose so much control. I think they know that they lose control, but they are trying to regain some parts of the control, and they are using a very old formula. George Orwell, 1 century ago, also teach us how you can use the words in a meaning that is the contrary of what it means. So when they talk about fixing, they are not talking about fixing, they are talking about controlling. When they say this kind of words, usually the implication is that they want to come back to the old world, and the old world doesn't exist already. And I hope, I'm very positive on this, that the young people will be able to deal very well with this very complex world. But indeed, the world is very complex, and they need to realize that first.
Indeed. Well, Joanna allows me for a second and very short round of questions, even if we have to extend the session by 2 or 3 minutes.
Very
one
short,
question. Okay,
yes,
so let me ask you for telegraphic answers. There is a question for Ms. McKinnon on a European Union directive on copyright and related rights in the digital single market that makes service providers responsible for the content of their users. This could force service providers to put automated filters. How do you think this could affect free access to knowledge and information? This is the question for Rebecca. Then the question for Vicente, which is a long one. In today's media wall of digital rights and open technology knowledge, where the traditional newspapers, magazines, and even political TV networks are dead or dying, and instead people tend to read and watch on TV or social media, mostly digital media, that conform with their own political and cultural views. So basically that reconfirms their point of views. How can we fight this and help people get out of their own bubble? Because it seems that all this world is closing us in very small bubbles. So please, Rebecca.
Yeah, well, just
very
briefly,
short,
yeah, automated filters. We oppose automated filter requirements because we already see, even with the more centralized social media platforms, there are all kinds of errors in content moderation. You see activism, journalism being filtered out because the algorithms just don't understand the context sufficiently, and humans need to be in the loop. And what makes Wikipedia articles good is that when you have a large number of people who understand the context in which information is being posted, they can make informed judgments about that. Includes understanding what is art, what is etc. So we oppose automated filters, and also intermediary protections for platforms when it comes to users' content. Users posting content are absolutely essential for open knowledge projects. Wikipedia and related open knowledge projects will not be able to exist if platforms are held legally responsible for every post that every user makes. It's just not viable. It's not helpful to society. There are other ways to get to the source of the problems: business models, targeted advertising, etc., that are really driving the harms with much of the content that legislators are concerned about, and that's where they need to focus.
Thank you so much. Vicent, on the role of journalists in helping us breaking our small bubble.
Yeah, I think this question of bubbles is again an Orwellian question, because it has been always. Let's go to a neutral city, Paris, for instance. If in the 60s you were reading Le Figaro or you were reading Libération, you were in two different bubbles. It's the same thing. It's like this story is in my opinion, it's a nonsense, because in fact there is a big difference. With the papers, every positive action, buying a newspaper, implies negative actions, not buying other newspapers. But I don't know no one that just go into the internet to read one single newspaper. Always people read different newspapers. Of course, polarization is a problem, and it's a problem for the societies. But the polarization debate is not only a debate for the media, it's much more a debate for the politicians. The ones who polarize are the politicians, and the media follow the politician in this sense. So I think there is a place for media in our societies. Of course, I have been dedicating my last 27 years to this thing. I am obligated to believe on this. But the most important thing, in my opinion, for journalists is to be humble about this. And this is a big problem for us. We need to understand that the society changed, that the environment is not the one we used to have, and that we must find our way in this new environment, but not because we were journalists, but because we can help, and it's very different. And I think the big difference between a social network user and a journalist is that you cannot ask when a Twitter account shares something, they have no more responsibilities. When a journalist shares something, we have responsibilities because we have been paid for doing this. We have rules, we have etc. So to me, the debate must be turned upside down. We are the ones who need to learn how to work in this environment.
Very interesting. So thank you so much to both of you. Joanna, please.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today. Mrs. Rebecca, Mr. Vicent, Partal, Albert, Arnau also on the backstage. He's also on the backstage and he really works very, very good. And thanks to all the audience as well for being here today at from 4 to 5 o'clock in the evening. Thank you for your participation. As I would say, we will share all the content in our social media, so we will work on that later. And well, thanks to everyone and have a nice week to everyone.